I want to share with you a dilemma that I had just this week coming into the message this morning. So we moved about a month ago, and we moved from a very small place into something a little bit bigger. And that meant we had very little. We had a couch, a dining room table, and 2 beds. That was the totality of our furniture out of our old place. And we've had to gather some new things. And so in the last month, I have gone to 8 different homes through Craigslist, buying some used furniture. And at all of them, I have had a dilemma. The biggest dilemma was this week. So this week, I was going to pick up this last thing that I needed. It was a chair for my daughter. And I don't mind saying, I had seen a chair on Craigslist for about $500 that I thought she should get. She liked a $50 version better, and I get that there's a difference between those. But so I'm off to buy this $50 chair for my daughter, and I'm not feeling really good about it from the get-go because it's a chair that could be thrown away as much as sold for $50. That's how I feel about the chair. It's not, so just, you know where I'm at here. I'm thinking, is this worth my gas and my time to go get it? And then I'm kind of in this dilemma between, okay, you go to pick up a $50 chair. If people want, let's say, $100 for a chair on Craigslist, they ask for $125 so that you can get it for $100 and everybody walks away happy. But $50, like, do I offer $40? Do I where's the line there? What do you get it for? And so I go to pick up this chair, and there's part of me wondering, is 25 too low? 40, that's kind of the range I'm thinking. And then separate from that, there's been a lot of dwelling on gratitude. It's Thanksgiving. My 25-year anniversary is not that far in the rearview mirror of being here at New Life. And there's been a season of just reflection for me of gratitude for the church, gratitude for people, gratitude for all that God has done. We just moved into this house a month ago. I'm filled with gratitude for that. There's all kinds of thanks. And so I walk in to buy this chair for $50, and there's part of me thinking, all right, 25 to 40, that's your range. And there's part of me thinking, you're not going less than 50, and you should probably just tip above that. You have it. God has blessed you. Be generous. And those two things, they compete against each other, at least in my mind, perhaps in all of our minds. We're going to continue a theme of Thanksgiving. I'll let you know where the chair settled later. Stay tuned. But we're going to talk about gratitude and its producing generosity. That gratitude in and of itself, it produces lots of things biblically. Gratitude produces worship. Gratitude produces evangelism, sharing about God. Gratitude produces all sorts of good things biblically: kindness, service, community, forgiveness. But beyond all things, there is an immediate tie between gratitude and generosity in the Bible. And we see those two things together in a teaching in 2 Corinthians that is really strong. So in 2 Corinthians, Paul takes 2 entire chapters to talk about gratitude and generosity. So we're not going to read through the entirety of the chapters, but we're going to go from verse 6 in chapter 9 to verse 12, and we're going to read through that passage. It starts out, the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So Paul establishes this principle right at the onset. That if you sow generously, you reap generously. And he's not simply talking about financial or material things of this world, although that's included. He's saying if you are generous, you reap blessings in your life. Whoever sows sparingly reaps sparingly, but whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. And that doesn't just mean that if you sow a lot, you reap a lot. In other words, if you are really generous, sacrificially generous, you receive great blessings out of that. The word bountifully here is tied to an Old Testament passage. So 4 verses as we read through this are all quotations from the Old Testament. This is the first one. So this comes out of Proverbs chapter 22, verse 9. Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. Whoever has a bountiful eye, in other words, when Paul is writing and he says, whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully, he's reflecting back on this verse. Whoever has a bountiful eye. It takes a pause to look at all of the blessings one has to be grateful. You have to pause and look for it, to dwell on it. You have to have eyes to see. You can have eyes that complain. Like if I was served cranberry jello out of a can, I'm not sure how I would react. No, it's possible. It's possible to have immense blessings all around you and have a negative attitude. I'll share more about this later, but one thing I've been really thankful for lately, perhaps more than normal, is to be an American citizen. I have been proud of the country that I am a part of. So with all of the events in the Middle East, in Israel, and I'm not going to get into, I have many Jewish friends, I have many Palestinian friends, and God loves both. I'll leave that part there. But in the midst of all of that, I have frequently just kind of reflected, if it wasn't for America, Israel's gone. Like every other force in this world, if it wasn't for America, Iran has already jumped in. And so I've been thankful. And I've been in the midst of lots of conversations in which the conversation is, man, our Congress this, our president this, that president this. And I'm like, slow down just a moment and kiss the ground and thank God. Like we have much to be thankful. So it takes eyes to look. Otherwise, human nature, human tendency is to go towards the negative side. And so Paul is saying that whoever sows with a generous eye, in other words, their eye sees all the blessings they have. Whoever out of that then is generous, that person is blessed 1,000-fold. The passage goes on, verse 7. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now there's a lot going on here. So as Paul writes this letter, his plans have changed. He was going to go to Corinth to visit, and he was going to go twice. But instead of going twice, he's only going once. And only going once, he's putting it off till later. He's changing his travel plans. And all kinds of people grumbled against him and said he's not even an apostle. He changes his plans. What does he deserve to even come? And so he writes this letter saying, no, I am coming. I will just come once. But here's the trick. The saints in Jerusalem, they're hurting. They're impoverished, they're poor, they can't find work, they live in a world in which being a Christian is genuinely to be persecuted. And so he's writing to Corinth. He's saying, hey, when I come and visit you, I get it, you'll give, because I'll be there in your midst, and there's going to be a pressure on. But I'm sending to you right now, we don't even know all that he sent. He sends Titus and 2 other people. We don't know who they are. Maybe Barnabas, maybe Apollos, maybe Luke. Those are the strong guesses out there. So Titus and 2 others go to Corinth, and they take this letter with them. Paul says, each one must give what he decides. Like, I get that I'm not there. And if I was there, there'd be some pressure. But I don't want you to give because I'm there. I don't want you to give because there's this pressure. I want you to give because the Holy Spirit is nudging you to give. I want you to give because you see what's going on here. This is a cosmic beauty as God works out his redemptive purposes in this world. You are a Gentile church of Greece, a port city, Corinth, and you're going to be giving to a Jewish church in Jerusalem. Like, the hatred between Jew and Gentile is going to come down. And the beauty of a port city giving to Jerusalem. And you could think, well, Jerusalem, that's a rich city. There's all kinds of wealth there. And there is, but not amongst the Christians. They're persecuted people. And Paul is saying there's a beauty of what's going on here. And for you to give, I want you to give joyfully. I want you to give freely. Not only that, as he quotes passages through here, he's saying, gratitude and generosity, they're not add-ons to the Christian life. Gratitude and generosity are at the very heart of God. This is who God is. Thanksgiving and generosity flow out of simply meeting him, experiencing him. I want you to give joyfully, not out of compulsion. And the passage goes on, verse 8. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. This all comes from God. This all comes from seeing just how much God has blessed you. This all comes at reflecting at how good God is, and out of an overflow of that, pouring out to others. Gratitude and generosity. A heart that is not generous is not grateful. It might say it is, but it's not. Gratitude produces generosity. It all comes back to seeing God has given you. The passage goes on in verse 9. As it is written, he has distributed freely, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. Now, at first glance, you could read this verse as if it's attributing these things to God. God has distributed freely. God has given to the poor. God's righteousness endures forever. But that's not what the passage is saying. And we know that factually because this is the second Old Testament quote in this passage. And so this goes back to Psalm 112, verse 9. He has distributed freely. He has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. In fact, there's another little addition in verse 9. His horn is exalted in honor. And in Psalm 112, it's talking about the righteous person who delights himself in the Lord and in the commandments of the Lord. And then Psalm 112 goes through all the things. Someone who fears the Lord, who delights himself in the Lord, he will, and then it just goes over and over and over all the things he does. And it says he has distributed freely, and he has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. His righteousness endures forever. And there's a couple things going on in this verse, saying this whole passage goes both directions. In other words, gratitude produces generosity. But generosity produces gratitude. You want to work on your thanksgiving? Be more generous, sacrificially generous. Give. And watch gratitude well up. Gratitude produces generosity. Generosity produces gratitude. In fact, even two sides of the same coin, when Paul says, hey, I don't want you to give out of compulsion. I want you to give joyfully. Here's a little trick. Joy produces obedience, but, and stay with me, obedience produces joy. The person in this passage is recognized as righteous because of their obedience, because of their generosity. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can earn your own righteousness. I'm not suggesting that we become holy because of what we give. But there is a dynamic in this passage that is saying this is a commandment God has for us to live generous lives filled with gratitude. I'm going to take a tangent and read verse 13, and then we'll come back. Verse 13. By their approval of this service, they will glorify God. The saints in Jerusalem, when they receive this gift, they will glorify God because of your submission flowing from your confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others. When the saints in Jerusalem get your gift, Corinth, they're going to glorify God because you submitted yourself to God. Yes, generosity is to be joyful. But let me tell you a secret. If you wait until it's fun and joyful to give things away, you'll never give them away. There will be a part of you and a part of me that says, I want to keep. It is in every single one of us. And so there is a dynamic of generosity that is obedience. You do it because God says to do it. And when you do it because God says to do it, you walk in righteousness. Not that you're earning your own righteousness, but you enter a mathematical formula in which gratitude, an eye that sees the goodness of God, it produces generosity, and generosity then produces worship. It produces righteousness. It flows in the passage. Listen to verse 10 as it goes on. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. In other words, God is the source. He gives all the seed for the sowing. This is all God. And so it starts with this gratitude of just seeing all that God has given. But then God supplies seed for the sower, and that seed is then sown, and it produces a harvest of righteousness. Gratitude for what God has given produces generosity. That generosity produces righteousness. Not righteousness because of works, righteousness that goes back to God. But we do it in obedience. We do it in obedience. And you can watch this happen in all circles. It's not just a financial thing. It certainly is that. So back to the conversation of country. I've been very thankful for the United States on a cosmic level. I've never really considered just how powerful China and Iran would be if we were, you take us out. And so in multiple conversations of just griping about our country, you inject just a little, so I get that things aren't perfect. It's not ever going to be. Christ knows no boundaries for earthly nations. I'm not saying, hey, we're the greatest thing ever. But I, for one, am proud to be an American, and I'm very thankful for how God uses us, maybe in spite of ourselves, even currently in this world. And you inject that, and all of a sudden the conversation moves and changes. It's a gratitude that produces righteousness. It's a gratitude that produces generous, joyful hearts and hearts that walk in righteousness. Gratitude is a good thing. The passage continues, verse 11. You will be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. God's going to pour out his favor on you in order that you can be generous. You're going to be generous, Corinth, and we're going to take that gift to Jerusalem, and there's going to be an explosion of thanksgiving. He doesn't say it directly, but part of it is the Jews there are going to be overwhelmingly humbled that a Gentile church would give sacrificially to see them cared for. It's a beautiful thing. This is the direction of God's entire redemptive plan, where there would no longer be Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female, where all of these things would come down and God would dwell with us in our midst. And there would be a peace between peoples. This is the direction. No more war, no more suffering, no more pain. And Corinth, your giving is bringing that about right here. And it is going to be worshipful. And it is going to be good. Verse 12. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. For the ministry of this service, the word there is actually liturgy, the ministry, leturia. This is the order of worship. This is foundationally what a worship service should be, Paul says. You see the goodness of God. You allow that to flow through you in generosity to others. And that generosity meets the needs of people and brings about an overflow of worship in thanksgiving. And God is praised. This is the direction of the whole thing. It meets the needs of people, and it brings thanksgiving to God. So this week for me involved a number of hospital visits, more than normal just because of the way things worked. And I had a couple hospital visits in particular that people were overwhelmingly filled with joy. This is a very humbling thing. You carve out time, you walk into a hospital, and someone says they're shocked that you would stop by. And they're so blessed. And so you sit there, and there's tears in someone's eyes, thanking God that you would even be there. Yeah, I didn't say a thing. I hadn't prayed. I hadn't, nothing. I just me. That's all you got. And they're crying with joy. And that gratitude spills over. Now I'm bubbling and crying with joy. And I'm filled with gratitude for them, and I'm filled with gratitude for the church and just the goodness of God's people and the joy of being able to share with someone. And my biggest problem with that dumb chair is that I went to go pick up the chair after a hospital visit. I know. I just spent a good amount of time crying in gratitude to God, and then going for my good deal about a broken down chair that is just not even worth my time. And so I gave him more than it cost. That, I don't want to ruin the sermon, but that's just not something people of my ancestry did a lot in that kind of situation. But it was compulsive, and it was spontaneous, and it was the overflow of a heart that's just bubbling with gratitude. God is so outrageously good. I am constantly amazed that the King of Glory wants to spend time with me. That the King of Glory, within the billion times a billion things that he does every moment, whispers in my ear and nudges my heart and draws me into his presence because he wants to spend time with me. It's unfathomable. It's illogical. It's crazy talk. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And the more we dwell in the realm of gratitude and thanksgiving, the more we will find generosity flowing out of our hearts. And the more we find generosity flowing out of our hearts, the more it meets people's needs, even at a cosmic level of breaking down walls and fulfilling God's plans. But it also overflows in thanksgiving to God. It's what he's called us to do. Talked to someone this week. They had recently bought a house, and I shared that misery with them because we recently moved. So you buy this house. I think it's safe to say in my lifetime, and I remember 18%, 14%. I had my first CD was 18%. Jimmy Carter years when I was a kid. It's the worst time to buy a house in my lifetime. Everything about buying a house right now, just not so great. They just bought a house, and they just had their first Thanksgiving in their house. And they could not have gotten their house if it wasn't for family help. And so they were extra thankful just for what God had given them. They had extra guests over for Thanksgiving, and they were over the top, bubbling like a fountain in gratitude to God and gratitude for the generosity and gratitude for the community, all that brings. This is us. So how do we take a passage like this? 2 whole chapters Paul sends on this offering that the Corinthian church participated in for the Jerusalem church. 2 chapters. How do we apply this? How do we take this away? Let me suggest at least 2 principles we all ought to walk away with. And one is to cultivate eyes to see, to cultivate thanksgiving in our lives, to spend time looking. Remember the old hymn, count your many blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, name them one by one. All right, so anyway, I remember that one. Take time to reflect. I get that it's a broken world. I get that if we wanted to, we could dwell on negative things all the time. I get that that's the direction of the conversation of the world. From television to news to podcasts, to whatever we bring in is most likely influencing us to dwell on the negative. But if we pull away from that and we just recognize hands that work, eyes that see, ways that he compensates if our eyes don't see, all the blessings that God has given us, let's cultivate eyes that see, cultivate thanksgiving. And then number 2, practice sacrificial generosity. that ought to be the natural overflow of thanksgiving. But even if we're fighting for gratitude and fighting for thanksgiving, I would suggest that sacrificially giving will bring it about, because it will detach your life from this world and all the negativity, and it will draw you into what God is doing in pouring out his love to you and me and to this world. Cultivate eyes that see. Practice thanksgiving. So this morning we have a treat of turning from his word to baptisms. We have, I believe, 3 baptisms in this service, and I kind of forget. I think there's 8 or so over both services, 3 in this one and 5 in the second, plus or minus. And these are lives that have surrendered to the call of God, have said, Jesus, you're my treasure. Jesus, you're my pearl of great price. I set aside everything to follow you. I receive your love and I want to follow you. And we get to participate in that as they make this public declaration to say, I belong to Jesus. And we get to respond, and hopefully this is simply another part of thanksgiving and gratitude in our hearts as we watch people turn their lives and give their lives to Christ. Take a look at this video and then we'll participate in the baptisms.